Max Verstappen has just said the words that no Red Bull fan and no Formula One enthusiast wanted to hear. He said that he could easily quit tomorrow and that it wouldn't be a problem for him. He said it with an icy calm that is frightening, because there was no anger in his voice, no momentary frustration. There was the cold clarity of a man who has already analyzed all the options and who knows perfectly well what he wants from his future. It wasn't a tactical threat to get something from Red Bull. It wasn't a provocation thrown at the media to create pressure. It was the sincere and reasoned statement of a four-time world champion who is seriously and concretely considering whether Formula One is still worth his time and energy. And the thing that makes it all even more unsettling is the deep reason behind these words. It's not just the car that isn't working. It's not just Red Bull not giving him a competitive car. It's the Formula One 2026 regulations themselves, the way the cars are driven, the way energy management has changed the nature of the races, everything that Verstappen can't stand, and that could push him to leave this sport forever at the most unexpected moment of his career. Let's start with his exact words because the weight of what he said cannot be underestimated. Verstappen explained that he is 28 years old and that he could easily retire without any regret. He said that he loves racing and that he's trying to do his best with what he has available, even though what he has right now isn't what he likes. This sentence is devastating because it reveals two levels of dissatisfaction. The first is toward Red Bull and the performance of the RB22. The second is toward Formula One as a category and as a sporting product. Verstappen isn't just fighting against a difficult car. He's fighting against a regulation that has changed the very nature of the sport he loved. If you want to follow every development of this story that could change the future of Formula One, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments if you think Verstappen will really retire. Verstappen made an interesting comparison with Fernando Alonso that adds depth to his reflection. He said that for Alonso at 45 years old, it's probably easier to say enough, but that even a true racing driver, when he isn't enjoying himself with the regulations and isn't competitive, finds the situation extremely difficult to accept. He added that Alonso doesn't deserve to be in 21st position and that Aston Martin's situation is surreal. But the key point wasn't Alonso. The key point was Verstappen identifying with that feeling of frustration and publicly admitting that he isn't enjoying himself with the current Formula One rules. The two big problems for Verstappen remain exactly the same as they have for months, and neither of them has a quick solution on the horizon. The first is Red Bull's overall performance, which remains insufficient to fight for wins. The second is the 2026 power unit regulation that Verstappen deeply detests and considers incompatible with his idea of Formula One. Technical director Pierre Wache has finally explained in detail the reasons for Red Bull's delay, and his analysis is very revealing. He identified two main and complementary factors. The first is that rival teams, in particular Mercedes and Ferrari, simply worked better and more effectively during the winter preparation for the new regulations. These two teams arrived in Melbourne with an impressive advantage of about 1 second, an enormous gap that put Red Bull at a disadvantage from day one. The second factor is that the epic battle for the 2025 title between Verstappen and the McLarens of Norris and Piastri dragged on until the last race in Abu Dhabi, where Norris won the championship by just 2 points. This fight down to the last breath forced Red Bull to continue developing the 2025 car until the second half of the previous season, stealing precious months of time from the preparation of the project for the new 2026 regulations. Wache admitted that both Red Bull and McLaren are paying this price and that both teams find themselves behind compared to those who were able to focus entirely on the new regulations from the start. Hit like now because the next part reveals the true scale of the crisis and what Red Bull intends to do to get out of it. The major package of aerodynamic upgrades and weight reduction introduced at the Miami Grand Prix represented an important turning point and halved the gap to the championship leaders, allowing Verstappen to qualify on the front row for that race and to collect points consistently in the following races. But despite this significant progress, Red Bull remains only fourth in the Constructors' Championship with 177 points, still enormously distant from Mercedes, who lead with 379 points, and from Ferrari, second with 307. Wache honestly acknowledged that the progress made by the team has been interesting and encouraging, but openly admitted that Red Bull is not yet where it wants to be and that there is still a great deal of work to do before it can compete on equal terms with the teams that are dominating the season. And he made a statement that explains a lot about the current context, saying that both Red Bull and McLaren are paying the price for last year's title fight, which consumed resources and development time that other teams were able to dedicate entirely to the new regulations. Laurent Mekies raised the stakes with a public statement that leaves no room for interpretation, and that puts the team under enormous pressure for the second half of the season. Red Bull's team principal said in a firm and determined tone that the team will accept nothing less than race wins. He acknowledged the extraordinary work done by every single person at the Milton Keynes factory to progressively improve the car from the initial difficulties to the current situation, emphasizing that the team's collective efforts have brought Red Bull back into a position to fight for the podium in every single race on the calendar. But he immediately added firmly that they shouldn't expect statements of satisfaction from him, because the team will not be satisfied and cannot be satisfied until it has a car with the pace needed to win on its own merit on the track, and not thanks to bad luck or the problems of its rivals. This statement from Mekies is important because it contrasts directly with Verstappen's frustration. On one hand, the driver says he could easily quit. On the other hand, the team principal says the goal is to win, period. The question is whether Red Bull will be able to turn Mekies' words into concrete results quickly enough to convince Verstappen to remain motivated and committed to the project. Verstappen tried to balance his evident frustration with a positive message directed at the team and the fans, saying that Red Bull is like a second family to him, and that he is trying with all his strength to understand the car better in order to finally return to winning after a first half of the season without victories. He said that on at least one weekend during the season, they were very close to winning, and that he sincerely hopes this happens more frequently in the second part of the championship. He also affirmed with conviction that he believes Red Bull is on an upward trajectory compared to the disaster of the first races, and that this aspect is certainly positive and encouraging for the future. But these words of moderate optimism cannot and must not erase the bomb he dropped at the beginning of his statement when he said with absolute calm that he could easily retire tomorrow itself without the slightest regret. The complete picture of the situation is this, and there's no way to soften it. Verstappen loves racing with all of himself, but doesn't love the current Formula One regulations, and he said so publicly without filters. He has the contract exit clause active and valid until October, but no rival top team has a free seat to welcome him for next season. Red Bull is improving compared to the initial disaster, but is still fourth in the Constructors' Championship and extremely far from the dominant Mercedes. Mekies wants wins earned on merit, but the car is not yet at the technical level necessary to achieve them. And Formula One's regulations will undergo further adjustments in 2027 that could improve or worsen the situation depending on the direction the federation takes. Formula One returns to the track from the 21st to the 23rd of August with the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, a race that could be the last edition of the Dutch event for the foreseeable future. It will be Verstappen's home race and could be the perfect stage for his definitive announcement about his future. Share this video with anyone who follows Formula One, and stay on this channel because the coming weeks will decide whether the greatest champion of his generation will continue racing in Formula One, or whether he will say goodbye to this sport at the most unexpected and shocking moment of his extraordinary career.